I inherited money from my grandma, and my husband filed for divorce and wants half, so I did this. Jennifer Peterson could barely process the news when Brian slammed the divorce papers on the kitchen table, demanding half of the inheritance she had just received from Grandma Eleanor. $300,000 left by the matriarch who had raised her granddaughter after her parents passed away too soon. And now the man she had shared 10 years of her life with wanted his share as if it were an entitlement. That's when Brian pounded his fist on the table and said the words she would never forget. "Jennifer, you don't understand. This money is ours. I'm entitled to half of everything you received during our marriage," he said, with a coldness she had never seen in his eyes. "How is it ours?" "Grandma Eleanor left me this inheritance because I took care of her until her last day," Jennifer replied, still clutching the sealed letter that had come with the will. "The lawyer already explained everything. Assets acquired during marriage are split. Simple as that." Jennifer felt the ground slip from under her. 10 years of marriage, 3 failed attempts to have children, sleepless nights caring for her sick grandmother, and now this. The man who had sworn to love her stood there, papers already prepared, as if it were nothing more than a business transaction. "You had this ready," she murmured, flipping through the documents. "This is dated weeks ago." Brian looked away toward the living room window. "Things haven't been right between us for a long time, Jennifer. You know that." "Not right? Since when?" she shot back, rising from her chair as anger swelled in her chest. "Since you became a slave to your grandmother, since our house turned into an extension of that old place, since you forgot you had a husband." His words cut like a razor. Jennifer had spent the last 2 years splitting her time between teaching at the public school and caring for Mrs. Eleanor, who suffered from diabetes and high blood pressure. Her grandmother had raised her alone after her parents died in a car accident when she was just 8. "Grandma needed me," she said, her voice trembling. "And what about me? Didn't I need you?" Jennifer looked at Brian as if seeing him for the first time. His neatly combed brown hair, the blue eyes that once made her dream, now cold as ice. He wore a blue shirt she had ironed just the morning before, back when she still believed they had a marriage to save. "You have 1 week to decide if you want to settle this amicably or if we're taking it to court," he continued, slipping a copy of the papers into his leather briefcase. "1 week? My lawyer said it's best to resolve this quickly. Less strain for everyone." Jennifer let the papers fall to the floor. The letter from her grandmother was still sealed in her hands, stamped with red wax like in the old days. Mrs. Eleanor had always been old-fashioned, a woman who believed in traditions and the power of handwritten words. "I need time to process this, Brian. Time is what we don't have. The estate is already open, and the longer we wait, the more expensive it gets for everyone." He grabbed his car keys from the kitchen counter. "Where are you going?" "Staying at my mom's until we settle this. I took some clothes yesterday." "Yesterday?" Jennifer felt like she'd been punched in the gut. "You were already moving out yesterday and didn't tell me." Brian paused at the door without turning around. "Jennifer, this was over a long time ago. I was just waiting for the right moment to make it official." The door slammed, and she was left alone in the kitchen of the house, where she had once dreamed of building a family. The silence was deafening, only the ticking of the wall clock and the distant hum of traffic outside. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, Jennifer walked to the window and looked out at the backyard where Mrs. Eleanor used to plant her herbs. Grandma always said the earth doesn't lie, that it gives back what you plant, but only if you tend to it with love and patience. Maybe that was why her marriage to Brian had failed. She had planted love, but he had planted self-interest. She sat in the rocking chair that had belonged to her grandmother and finally opened the letter. Mrs. Eleanor's shaky but still firm handwriting filled 3 pages of parchment paper. "My dearest Jennifer, if you're reading this, it's time for you to learn some truths I've kept to protect you. The money I left you isn't just an inheritance, it's a responsibility. Brian came to see me 3 times in the last few months. He wanted me to change my will to include him as a beneficiary. He said you two were struggling financially and that a devoted husband deserved recognition. I told him grandchildren are earned with love, not pretty words. On his last visit 2 weeks ago, he wasn't so polite. He said I was being unfair and that he had rights to any inheritance you received. That's when I knew what kind of man you'd chosen to share your life with. My dear, there's something even more important you need to know. What I've left you isn't just money. At the bank, along with the $300,000, there's a safety deposit box. The key is inside the Bible that always sat on my nightstand, tucked between the pages of Psalm 23. There you'll find documents showing the true source of our family's wealth. Your great-grandmother Margaret, my mother, was a woman ahead of her time. She recorded recipes for candies and preserves that our family had guarded for generations. Those records are in the box, along with letters from people interested in buying them. A company from Chicago offered $500,000 for them last year. I refused because I knew it wasn't the right time. Now it's your turn to decide what to do with this legacy. Trust your intuition, my dear, and remember, true riches can't be divided, only multiplied when shared with love. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor. P.S. If Brian insists on legal action, contact attorney Richard Miller at Maple Street, 847. He's known our family for years and has documents that may be useful. Jennifer's hands trembled as she finished reading 3 visits from Brian to her grandmother. He'd never mentioned that. In fact, Brian always made excuses not to visit Mrs. Eleanor with her, saying the house smelled like medicine and that old people's talk bored him. She rushed to her grandmother's room, now empty since her passing 3 weeks ago. The Bible was still on the nightstand, right where it had always been. With her heart racing, she flipped to Psalm 23, and there it was, a small, golden key. The next day, Jennifer drove to the bank where Mrs. Eleanor had kept her accounts. The manager, Mr. Thompson, offered his condolences and escorted her to the vault. Her grandmother's key opened a metal box containing far more than she'd imagined. Old documents, some dating back to the early 1900s, revealed records of family recipes. These weren't ordinary recipes, but precise formulas for crystallized candies, specialty jams, and preserves with unique preservation properties. Mrs. Margaret had been a pioneer in the art of preserving food without chemicals. Among the papers, she found letters from business owners interested in the recipes, including a formal proposal from a major food industry in Chicago offering $500,000 for the rights to the formulas. The letter was dated just 8 months ago, but what shocked her most was finding notes from her own grandmother about Brian's visits. Grandma Eleanor had recorded every conversation, including his attempts to convince her to create a joint will that would benefit the couple. March 15th. Brian came alone today. Asked about my financial situation, said Jennifer was worried about my future. A lie. Jennifer would never leave me in a difficult spot. April 8th. Second visit from my son-in-law. Brought flowers and chocolates, talked about the importance of preparing the family's future, hinted that I should consider including him in my will. I said no. April 29th, third visit. April 29th, third. Brian was more direct this time. Said that as Jennifer's husband, he had a moral right to any inheritance. Mentioned the couple's expenses and financial struggles. I know my granddaughter. If they had problems, she would have told me. Jennifer felt sick. During those months, Brian had never mentioned financial struggles to her. On the contrary, he had bought a new car at the start of the year and talked about taking a trip abroad. She gathered all the documents and left the bank with the feeling that her life had been turned upside down, not just because of the inheritance, but because she had lived 10 years with a man she didn't truly know. The next afternoon, she went to see the lawyer her grandmother had mentioned. Dr. Richard Miller was a man around 60, with graying hair and reading glasses. His office was in an old house in downtown Burlington, where Jennifer had been born and raised. Mrs. Peterson, I've been expecting your visit, he said, offering her a cup of coffee. Mrs. Eleanor came to me 3 months ago, concerned about certain situations. Did you know my grandmother long? Since I arrived in town 30 years ago, she was one of the first people to trust my work. Your grandmother was an extraordinary woman. Dr. Richard opened a thick folder. She asked me to prepare some protective documents. Mrs. Eleanor suspected your husband might try to contest the inheritance, so we took some legal precautions. What kind of precautions? First, all her assets were classified as separate property, acquired before her marriage with no involvement from her spouse. Second, she made a specific will clarifying that the inheritance is individual and non-transferable. Jennifer felt momentary relief. Does that mean Brian has no claim? Legally, no, but he could try to argue he somehow contributed to maintaining or increasing your grandmother's estate. It would be a weak case, but possible. What about the family recipes? That's different. The recipes were registered as the family's intellectual property. They predate your marriage and technically aren't even part of the formal estate. They're a separate asset. Dr. Richard leaned forward. Mrs. Peterson, may I ask you a personal question? Were you aware of your husband's financial troubles? Financial troubles? What troubles? The lawyer hesitated before continuing. Mrs. Eleanor asked me to discreetly investigate Brian's situation. She was concerned about his persistence regarding the will. He opened another folder and showed her some documents. Your husband has significant debts, credit cards, loans, financing. Nothing criminal, but a very complicated financial situation. Jennifer looked at the papers, struggling to process it all. Large amounts, overdue payments, accumulated interest. How had Brian hidden all of this from her? There's something else, the attorney continued. The debts aren't recent. Some date back more than 2 years. 2 years? But how did he manage to hide that? Many of the loans were taken out in the name of the company he works for. Brian is a minority partner, so technically the debts are business-related, but he signed as a personal guarantor. Jennifer remembered that Brian had always handled the household finances alone. He said it was so she wouldn't have to worry about paperwork, that she already had enough on her plate with school and taking care of Grandma. How much does he owe? Close to $150,000. The number echoed in her mind like a gong. $150,000. Nearly half the inheritance she had received from her grandmother. Now it all makes sense, she murmured. What makes sense? His visits to my grandmother, his insistence on divorce right after she received the inheritance. He doesn't want to share a life with me. He wants to share the money. Dr. Richard nodded gravely. Unfortunately, that conclusion seems obvious given the facts, but don't worry. We can protect your rights. Jennifer left the office with a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because she could protect her grandmother's inheritance. Sadness because she now realized her marriage had been a lie for far longer than she'd imagined. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. That night, Jennifer was at home making tea when the doorbell rang. She expected to see Brian, but it was Mrs. Anderson, her mother-in-law, standing at the door. Jennifer, dear, can we talk? Mrs. Anderson was a 65-year-old woman, always impeccably dressed with elegant clothes. She had never liked Jennifer much, always hinting that her son deserved someone better. Of course, come in. They sat in the living room, and for the first time in all the years Jennifer had known her, Mrs. Anderson seemed uncomfortable. I heard about the divorce, she began. Brian told you? Yes, and about the inheritance too. Jennifer served tea, bracing herself for another argument about her son's rights. I came here to apologize, Mrs. Anderson said, surprising Jennifer. Apologize? For raising a son who would do this to his own wife, and to tell you some things you need to know. Mrs. Anderson nervously stirred her cup. Brian was always too ambitious for his own good. Even as a child, he wanted more than he could have. When he found out you had a grandmother who was well off, he started making plans. Plans? He told me, right at the start of your relationship, that your family had money. I thought he was exaggerating, but then he started investigating. He asked people in town about Mrs. Eleanor, about the properties she owned. Jennifer felt a chill in her stomach. That was 10 years ago? Yes, right when you two got serious. I tried to talk to him, told him love shouldn't be built on self-interest, but he said he was just being cautious. And you never told me? Mrs. Anderson lowered her eyes. I thought maybe love would change him. And you two seemed happy in the early years. We were happy, or at least I was. Jennifer, there's one more thing. Brian has... How do I put this? He has someone else. Jennifer's heart stopped. Someone else? A woman from the company he works with. Melissa something. They've been together for almost 2 years. 2 years. Exactly the time Jennifer had been most dedicated to caring for her grandmother. The time when Brian complained she was always absent. Are you sure? Yes. I've seen them together several times. And she's expecting a baby. The world stopped. Jennifer felt as if every certainty in her life had crumbled at once. A baby? 5 months. Brian told me last week. He said he would take responsibility for the child, but needed to settle the financial situation with you first. Settle the financial situation, Jennifer repeated, feeling her anger rise. He wants to use my grandmother's money to start a new family. That's why I came to tell you this isn't right, Jennifer. You don't deserve this. Mrs. Anderson stood up. I don't know if I can do anything else, but if you need a witness for anything I've said today, you can count on me. After her mother-in-law left, Jennifer sat on the living room floor and cried for hours. She cried for the grandmother she had lost, for the marriage she now knew was a lie, for the children she never had, and now realized Brian never wanted to have with her. But when her tears dried, a new determination took hold. She wouldn't let Brian turn her grandmother's love into fuel for his betrayal. The next day, she sought out a family law attorney, Attorney Sarah Johnson. A woman in her 40s, Sarah was well known in the city for representing women in complex divorce cases. Jennifer, based on what you've told me, we have several paths to protect your rights, Attorney Sarah said after hearing the whole story. I just don't want him getting anything that belonged to my grandmother. That's possible, but I suggest we think beyond just defense. Let's go on the offensive. What do you mean? If Brian hid debts during the marriage, that shows bad faith. We can sue for emotional damages. Plus, if we prove he married you with ulterior motives, we might even invalidate the property division agreement. Is that really possible? With the evidence you have, yes. Your grandmother's notes, your mother-in-law's testimony, records of the hidden debts. It all builds a strong case. Attorney Sarah leaned forward. But before we proceed, I need to ask, are you sure you want to take this all the way? Cases like this can be long and draining. Jennifer thought of her grandmother, the century-old recipes, the letter filled with love and wisdom. She also thought of the baby Brian was having with another woman while pretending to save their marriage. I'm sure I want to see this through. The following week, Brian showed up at the house with his lawyer, Attorney Michael Roberts. A younger man in an expensive suit, he carried himself with arrogance. Jennifer, let's handle this like civilized people, Brian said, sitting at the kitchen table as if he still lived there. Civilized? Like how you were civilized when you hid debts from me for 2 years, she replied, keeping her voice steady. Brian exchanged a glance with his lawyer. The company's debts aren't personal business. Aren't they? Then why do you need my inheritance to pay them off? Attorney Michael intervened. Mrs. Peterson, my client is legally entitled to half of the assets acquired during the marriage. That includes inheritances, it's that simple. Actually, it's not so simple, Attorney Sarah said, walking into the room. Jennifer had arranged for her lawyer to arrive 15 minutes later to catch Brian off guard. This is my attorney, Attorney Sarah Johnson, Jennifer said. The mood in the room shifted immediately. Attorney Michael knew Attorney Sarah's reputation. Attorney Sarah, what a pleasure to see you, he said, clearly uncomfortable. The pleasure's mine, Attorney Michael, especially in cases like this where we have such interesting documentation. She placed a thick folder on the table. For example, we have records showing Mr. Brian visited Mrs. Eleanor 3 times, trying to convince her to change the will. We also have documentation of debts hidden during the marriage and, most interesting, proof of an extramarital affair over the last 2 years. Brian paled. Extramarital affairs during the marriage can constitute adultery, which is grounds for fault-based divorce, continued Attorney Sarah. In this case, the unfaithful spouse forfeits rights to the betrayed spouse's assets. This "This is blackmail," stammered Attorney Michael. "No, Counselor, this is the law, and I'm not finished yet." Attorney Sarah opened another document. "We have here a statement from Mrs. Barbara Anderson, the petitioner's mother, confirming that he investigated his wife's family's financial situation before the marriage and has been involved in an extramarital affair for 2 years, including expecting a child with the other woman." Brian stood up abruptly. "My mother had no right to say that." "Your mother had every right to tell the truth," said Jennifer, "just as I have the right to know what kind of man I married." "Look, Jennifer, we can settle this without unnecessary exposure," Brian said, trying to shift his tone. "You keep most of it, I'll just take enough to sort out a few things. A few things like paying off your debts and supporting your child with another woman. It's not like that." "It's exactly like that," Attorney Sarah interrupted. "And given the facts presented, my client is filing for a fault-based divorce, seeking compensation for emotional damages and the annulment of any claim you have on assets acquired by her during the marriage." Attorney Michael tried to protest, but Attorney Sarah continued. "Furthermore, since the debts were concealed, they remain the sole responsibility of the debtor. My client has no obligation to assume financial commitments she was unaware of." Brian left the house visibly shaken, followed by his lawyer. Before getting into the car, he turned to Jennifer. "You'll regret this. I was always a good husband to you." "You were a lying, self-serving husband," she replied. "The difference is now I know it." "Oh." After they left, Jennifer sat in Grandma Eleanor's rocking chair and reopened the letter. She reread the words about true wealth multiplying when shared with love. Mrs. Eleanor was right. The money would only be a blessing if she did something positive with it. That's when an idea came to her, one that would change everything. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The next morning, Jennifer drove to the food company that had made an offer for her family's recipes. She wanted to meet in person the people interested in her family's legacy. The company was located in a modern building in Chicago's industrial district. She was greeted by the sales director, Mr. William Harrison, a middle-aged man who treated her with great respect. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm sorry for Mrs. Eleanor's passing. She was an extraordinary woman. We spoke many times over the years. You knew my grandmother well?" "I did. 15 years ago, we tried to buy her recipes. She was always polite but firm in her refusal to sell." Mr. Harrison gave Jennifer a full tour of the company, explaining how traditional recipes were gaining value in the global market. "Nowadays, people want natural products, free of chemical preservatives. Your family's formulas are pure gold in this market. What exactly is the deal you're proposing?" "Our original offer of $500,000 still stands. We'd buy the exclusive rights to the recipes and mass-produce them, distributing nationally and for export." Jennifer asked several technical questions. The company was solid, well-structured, and the offer seemed fair. But something didn't feel right. "Mr. Harrison, can I ask you a direct question? If you bought the recipes, what would happen to our family tradition?" "What do you mean?" "These recipes have been passed down for over 100 years. My great-grandmother Margaret learned them from her mother. My grandma Eleanor learned from her, and so on. If I sell them, does that tradition end?" Mr. Harrison hesitated. "Well, technically, you could still make them for personal use, but not for commercial sale. The rights would belong exclusively to us." Jennifer left the company feeling that selling the recipes would be like selling her family's soul. The offer was financially attractive, but something inside her told her that Grandma Eleanor wouldn't approve. On her way back to Burlington, she stopped in a small town called Three Rivers and walked into a local bakery. The owner, Mrs. Wilson, was a 70-year-old woman who made handmade sweets. "These are delicious," Jennifer said, tasting a gourmet chocolate truffle. "Thank you, dear. It's my grandmother's recipe, who learned it from her grandmother. A family tradition." "And can you make a good living just from the bakery?" "We manage. We are not rich, but we make ends meet and find great joy in it. Seeing people's happy faces when they taste our sweets is priceless." Jennifer talked with Mrs. Wilson for over an hour. She learned that the woman had raised 6 children by running the bakery, put them all through school, and was now teaching the recipes to her granddaughters. "You know what I always say," Mrs. Wilson remarked. "Money comes and goes, but family tradition, that lasts forever." In the car on her way home, Jennifer had a revelation. What if, instead of selling the recipes or keeping them just for herself, she found a way to honor her family's tradition while helping others? At home, she spent the night studying the recipes her grandmother had left behind. They weren't just instructions for sweets, they were full of natural food preservation methods. Mrs. Margaret had been a pioneer, creating techniques that today would be considered organic and sustainable. The next day, Jennifer reached out to Rachel Williams, an old school friend who now worked on social projects for the city. "Rachel, I have an idea, but I need your help to see if it's feasible. Tell me, what if we created a women's cooperative to produce handmade sweets and preserves using traditional recipes?" Rachel lit up immediately. "That would be amazing. There are so many women in town who need income and are great cooks. My idea is to teach them my family's recipes and create a collective brand. Each could work from home but follow unified quality standards." "And the financial side?" "I'd provide the startup capital and recipes. They'd contribute their labor and local knowledge. Profits would be shared proportionally." Rachel did some quick mental math. With the right recipes and good marketing, this could generate significant income for many families. "Exactly. And there's more. Part of the profits would go into a scholarship fund for local youth." "Jennifer, this is fantastic. When can we start?" "I need to sort out some legal details first, but soon." That afternoon, Jennifer returned to Attorney Richards' office to discuss the project's legal feasibility. "It's an excellent idea," the lawyer said, "and it has the advantage of keeping the recipes in the family, just expanding the idea of family to include the community." "Exactly. That's what I felt. Selling to a big company would betray the spirit of these recipes. We'll need to formally structure a cooperative, register the recipes under its name, draft participation agreements. It's a bit complex, but entirely doable." "How long would it take?" 2, maybe 3 months to get everything officially running." Jennifer left the office in high spirits, but when she got home, she found Brian waiting at the door. "We need to talk," he said. "Brian, any conversation between us needs to happen with our attorneys present. Jennifer, please, just 5 minutes." She opened the door but kept her distance. "What do you want?" "I want to try to explain some things." "Explain what? The pregnant mistress? The hidden debts? The visits to my grandma trying to change the will?" Brian sat on the couch and buried his head in his hands. "Jennifer, I know I ruined everything. I know I made the wrong choices." "Wrong choices? Brian, you built our entire life on lies. It wasn't supposed to be like this. In the beginning, I really was in love with you." "In the beginning?" "Yes, but then things got hard. The business debts, the pressure, your obsessive care for your grandma." "Obsessive care? She raised me after my parents passed away. It was my duty to take care of her." I know. But it was like you had no time for anything else. For me, for our marriage, for even thinking about having kids." Jennifer felt fury rising in her chest. "No time to have kids? Brian, we went to the doctor 3 times because I was struggling to get pregnant. I did all the tests, all the treatments. And you never even wanted to get the male tests done." "Jennifer, now I understand why. You already knew you didn't want kids with me. You were already planning your new life with Melissa." Brian stayed silent. "You know what hurts the most, Brian? It's not even the cheating, it's finding out you never respected me. If you weren't happy, you could have talked to me, could have asked for a divorce honestly. But no. You chose to use me until you got what you wanted. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. And you know what's the most ironic part? You spent 2 years scheming to get part of my grandma's inheritance, but she already knew everything. She had already protected herself against people like you." "What do you mean by that?" "I mean you won't see a single cent of her money, and more, you're facing a lawsuit for emotional damages that could cost you dearly." Brian stood up, nervous. "Jennifer, this is revenge. It's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fairness? Fair would have been you being honest with me from the start. Fair would have been you ending our marriage before starting another one. And now? What's going to happen to me? That's not my problem anymore, Brian. You're an adult. You'll have to face the consequences of your choices. What about the baby? What about Melissa? The baby and Melissa aren't my problems either. You'll have to manage with whatever resources you have. Brian left the house visibly defeated. Jennifer watched through the window as he got into his car, certain this would be the last time she'd see him as her husband. 2 weeks later, attorney Sarah called with good news. Jennifer, Brian accepted the fault-based divorce agreement. He gave up any claim to the inheritance and will take on all the debts he incurred alone. What about the emotional damages? He'll pay $5,000 in compensation. It's not much, but it's what we could get given his financial situation. That's fine, I just want to put all this behind me and move on with my life. One last thing. Melissa's pregnancy is complicated. She'll need bed rest and won't be able to work for the next few months. His financial situation just got even harder. Jennifer felt a pang of pity, but no regret. Attorney Sarah, this just confirms I made the right decision. If I'd given in to his guilt trips, I'd be funding the new life he built on the lies of the old one. Exactly. You were very wise to protect your assets. But protecting her assets was only the first step. Jennifer wanted to do something meaningful with her grandma's inheritance. The following month, she officially established the Heritage Sweets Cooperative. 15 women from the region joined the project, each bringing their own culinary specialties to complement the family recipes. Mrs. Sullivan, 68 years old, was an expert in preserves. Frances, 52, made the best homemade bread in town. Louise, 45, had a talent for cake decorating. Each contributed their skills, and all learned the century-old recipes of great-grandmother Margaret. The cooperative space was set up in a house Jennifer rented in the historic center of Burlington. Industrial kitchen, packaging area, a small shop for direct sales, and an office for administration. Jennifer, I can't believe this is really happening, said Mrs. Sullivan on opening day. For years, I've dreamed of making money from my sweets, but never had a way to start. Mrs. Sullivan, you'll be our preserves specialist. Your jams are perfect for the traditional product line. And will my granddaughter be able to attend college with the project's scholarships? Yes, she will. That's the most important part of all. The scholarship fund had been structured to benefit young people from low-income families in the area. Part of the cooperative's profits went toward funding vocational and higher education, prioritizing women who wanted to pursue careers in culinary arts, administration, or entrepreneurship. 3 months after the opening, the cooperative already had contracts with 5 local markets and was supplying sweets to 3 inns in Burlington's tourist area. Jennifer, the numbers look really good, said Rachel, who had become the project's administrative coordinator. At this rate, each member will have a monthly income of at least 2 minimum wages. What about the scholarship fund? We've already approved 10 scholarships for this semester, 5 for vocational courses and 5 for college. Jennifer smiled, remembering her grandmother's words about wealth multiplied with love. Rachel, I want to expand the project. How so? What if we reach out to other towns in the region? Each town could have its own cooperative, but all connected, sharing recipes and knowledge. So, a cooperative network. Exactly. A network that preserves local traditions, but has the commercial strength to compete in the market. The idea excited Rachel, who began contacting neighboring town councils. It was during this expansion that Jennifer received an unexpected call. It was Melissa, the woman expecting Brian's child. Jennifer, I know you have no obligation to talk to me, but I need to speak with you. Melissa, please, just 5 minutes. I can come to your house, or you can choose another place. You can come here. An hour later, Melissa was in Jennifer's living room. She was a beautiful woman, around 30, visibly pregnant with deep, dark circles under her eyes. Jennifer, I want to apologize. Melissa, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I knew Brian was married. I knew, and I still got involved with him. Why? Because he lied to me too. He said you'd been separated for months, that it was only a matter of time before the divorce was finalized. Jennifer served tea for both of them. And when did you find out the truth? When he showed up desperate after you refused to split the inheritance. That's when I realized his whole story was a lie. How are you two now? Bad. Really bad. Brian is desperate over the debts. I can't work because of pregnancy complications, and he's what? He's drinking a lot and getting aggressive, not physically but verbally. Says the baby and I are to blame for his situation. Jennifer felt sorry for the woman but kept her composure. Melissa, I'm really sorry about the situation you're going through, but I didn't come here to ask for money, Melissa interrupted. I came to ask for something different. What? Are you hiring people for your cooperative? The question surprised Jennifer. You know how to cook? I do. My mom had a small bakery when I was a kid. I learned how to make bread, cakes, sweets. After she lost the bakery, I never had the chance to work with it again, but I remember everything. Melissa, Jennifer, I know it's really bold of me to come here asking for a job after what happened, but I need to support my child when they're born, and Brian can't even support himself. Jennifer stayed silent for a few minutes. Melissa, you understand it would be very difficult for me to have you working at the cooperative, right? I do. But I also understand that you're a good person, helping women who need opportunities. And I really need an opportunity. What about Brian? How would he react? Brian doesn't have a say in my life anymore. Either he accepts my decisions or I raise my child alone. Jennifer looked at Melissa and saw a woman who had made a mistake, but was trying to take responsibility for the consequences. You can start next week, but with a few conditions. What are they? First, it's a 3-month trial period. Second, any personal issues you have with Brian can't interfere with work. Third, you'll start part-time because of the pregnancy. Jennifer, I accept all the conditions, thank you so much. And Melissa, I'm not doing this for Brian or for you as a couple. I'm doing it because I believe every woman deserves a chance to start over. After Melissa left, Jennifer reflected on her decision. Some might call it naivety, others excessive kindness. She preferred to think she was following the example of Grandma Eleanor, who always believed in giving second chances to people who showed genuine remorse. Melissa joining the cooperative sparked some talk in town, but Jennifer stood by her decision. The woman proved to be dedicated, punctual, and truly talented at baking. Jennifer, Melissa's breads are a hit at the downtown market, Rachel commented after 2 weeks. She's capable, and she's going through a tough time. She deserves a chance. You're amazing. In the place of many women, she'd be treated like an enemy. Rachel, Melissa isn't my enemy. She was just another victim of Brian's lies. The difference is she had the courage to admit her mistake and try to change. Meanwhile, Brian had practically disappeared from town. Some said he was working in Chicago, trying to pay off debts. Others claimed he'd moved in with a brother in the countryside. Jennifer didn't care. Her life had taken a completely new and infinitely more satisfying direction. The cooperative was thriving. The scholarship fund had already helped 25 young people, and the network of cooperatives in other cities was expanding quickly. Then, one Sunday morning, exactly a year after Brian had asked for the divorce, Jennifer received a call that would change everything again. Jennifer, this is Mr. Harrison from the Chicago Food Company. Mr. Harrison, what a surprise. Jennifer, I have a different proposal for you. Different how? We've been following your cooperative's work. We heard about the expansion, the scholarship fund, all the social projects you've created. And we want to propose a partnership, not a buyout. Partnership? Exactly. We'll provide national and international distribution, and you keep the handmade production and control over the recipes. Profits would be split 50-50. Jennifer was intrigued. Would that mean the recipes would stay with the cooperatives? Yes. You'd be our exclusive suppliers, but would keep full autonomy over production and family tradition. And what would the practical difference be? In terms of revenue, we're talking about multiplying your current earnings by 10, but we'd keep the social and traditional character of the project. The offer was tempting, but Jennifer asked for time to think and consult the other cooperative members. Ladies, what do you think? She asked during a cooperative meeting. Jennifer, if the numbers he mentioned are accurate, This would change all our lives, said Mrs. Sullivan. And the scholarship fund would become much stronger, added Rachel. But aren't you worried about losing control of the project? Jennifer, you've already proven you can protect our interests, said Francis. If you think it's a good opportunity, we trust you. After 3 weeks of negotiations, Jennifer closed an innovative deal. The Chicago-based company would become the exclusive distributor of the cooperative's products, but the recipes, production methods, and social management would remain entirely with the cooperative members. Additionally, a special fund was created where part of the partnership's profits would go toward expanding the cooperative network to other regions of the country. Grandma Eleanor would be proud, said Dr. Richard when Jennifer went to his office to sign the final contracts. Dr. Richard, I'm sure she knew this would happen. How so? All the recipes she left can easily be adapted for larger-scale production without losing their artisanal quality. It's like she planned this expansion. Your grandmother truly was a visionary woman. 6 months later, the cooperative network was already active in 15 cities across 4 different states. The scholarship fund had helped over 200 young people, many of whom were returning to their communities as leaders of new cooperatives. Jennifer was in the cooperative office reviewing quarterly numbers when Rachel walked in with a strange expression. Jennifer, there's someone here to see you. Who is it? It's Brian. Jennifer hadn't seen her ex-husband in over a year. She asked Rachel to stay in the room during the conversation. Brian walked in, visibly worn down. He had lost weight, had an unkempt beard, and wore wrinkled clothes. Jennifer, I came to apologize. Brian, we have nothing left to discuss. I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to talk to you. Talk about what? That you were right about everything, that I was an idiot, selfish, a liar. Jennifer kept a neutral expression. And why are you telling me this now? Because I lost everything. The business went bankrupt. I'm living at my mom's place, and Melissa broke up with me. And the baby? He was born 3 months ago. A beautiful boy. But she doesn't want me near him. Why? Because I was drinking too much, saying horrible things, blaming everyone else for my mistakes. She gave me so many chances, but Brian started crying. Jennifer, you're already helping Melissa at the cooperative. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but what, Brian? Could you talk to her? Ask her to let me see my son? Jennifer looked at the man who had been her husband for 10 years. He was broken, humiliated, begging for help from the person he had tried to use and abandon. Brian, I won't interfere in your relationship. That's Melissa's decision. Jennifer, please. But I'll tell you this. If you really want a chance to be a father, start by proving you've changed. Stop drinking, get a job, take responsibility. And most importantly, stop blaming others for your mistakes. That's what I'm trying to do, but what? But no one gives me a chance. With my debt record, no one will hire me for anything. Jennifer stayed silent for a few minutes, looking at Brian. She saw a broken man but wondered if his change was real or just desperation. Brian, I have a proposal for you. What is it? The cooperative needs someone to handle deliveries and logistics. It's hard work, modest pay, but it's honest work. You'd hire me? I'd hire the father of Melissa's child, a man trying to rebuild his life. But it would be a 6-month probation period, and one misstep, you're out. Brian began to cry again. Jennifer, I don't deserve this. You're right, you don't. But your son deserves a responsible father, and Melissa deserves a reliable partner in raising their child. And you? Why are you doing this? Because my grandmother taught me that holding a grudge is a burden you carry alone. I'd rather invest my energy in positive things. Brian started working at the cooperative the following week. He was punctual, dedicated, and kept a respectful distance from Melissa and the other members. Gradually, he earned everyone's trust. Jennifer, I think he's really changed, Melissa commented 2 months later. He's paying child support on time, visits Mattie on weekends, and doesn't drink anymore. Did you take him back? No. That'll take time if it ever happens, but at least now I can work in peace knowing my son's father is being responsible. That night, Jennifer was at home looking through old photos of her grandmother when she found one she didn't remember seeing before. It showed a young Mrs. Eleanor, around 30, standing beside an even older woman, likely great-grandmother Margaret, her mother. On the back of the photo was a handwritten note. "To my dear daughter, always remember that our family has the gift of turning suffering into wisdom and wisdom into blessings for others. That is our true legacy." Jennifer smiled, finally understanding the real meaning of the inheritance she'd received. It wasn't the $300,000 or the century-old recipes. It was the ability to turn pain into growth, betrayal into an opportunity to help others, loss into multiplied love. 2 years later, the cooperative network had expanded to 23 states across the country. The scholarship fund had helped over 1,000 young people, many of whom were starting their own cooperatives in their towns. Jennifer was in her office preparing the annual report when she received a call from Washington, D.C. "Ms. Jennifer, this is the Office of the Department of Social Development. We'd like to invite you to a meeting about public policies for cooperatives." "What do you mean?" "Your cooperative network has caught the attention of the federal government. We'd like to discuss expanding the model nationwide with official support." "What exactly would that mean?" "It would mean turning your experience into national public policy, benefiting thousands of underserved communities across the United States." Jennifer hung up, moved. She remembered her grandmother's words about true wealth, multiplying when shared with love. The next afternoon, she was at Mrs. Eleanor's old house, which she'd turned into a center for family traditions. Sitting in her grandmother's rocking chair, she reread the letter that had changed her life. "Grandma, I think I finally understand what you meant about multiplying wealth," she said aloud, as if Mrs. Eleanor were still there. "It wasn't about money. It was about love, opportunities, hope." The wind rustled the curtains, and for a moment Jennifer felt as if her grandmother was smiling at her from somewhere. 3 months later, she was in Washington, D.C. signing an agreement that would turn the cooperative experience into a national program. The federal government would invest $5 million to replicate the model in 1,000 cities across the United States. "Mrs. Jennifer," said the secretary during the signing ceremony, "you've created something revolutionary, a model that combines tradition, social sustainability, and economic development." "Mr. Secretary, I didn't create anything. I just listened to what my grandmother had to teach me." That night at the hotel in Washington, D.C., Jennifer called Rachel. "Rachel, can you believe it all started with a divorce request? Sometimes I think your grandmother planned all of this, even Brian's behavior. You know, sometimes I think the same thing." "How so?" "What if she knew I needed to go through that pain to discover my true strength? What if she knew I'd only truly value the family legacy after almost losing it?" "Jennifer, your grandmother was wise, but she wasn't psychic." "No? Then how do you explain that all the recipes she left were perfect for cooperative production? How do you explain that she already had contacts with interested companies but never sold? How do you explain that she left exactly the amount needed to start the project, but not so much that I'd get complacent?" Rachel fell silent. "Rachel, are you there?" "I am. And you know what? I think you're right. Grandma Eleanor really did plan all of this." 5 years after the day Brian asked for a divorce, demanding half the inheritance, Jennifer was on stage at the largest convention center in Chicago, receiving the Social Entrepreneur of the Year award. In the audience were the first cooperative members from Burlington, including Mrs. Sullivan, now 73, and a regional coordinator for the network. Melissa was there too, holding 4-year-old Mattie in her arms. Brian wasn't present, but he had sent a letter that Jennifer read before the ceremony. "Jennifer, I know I have no right to be there in your moment of glory, but I wanted you to know how proud I am of what you've built. 5 years ago, when I asked for a divorce and demanded half of your grandmother's inheritance, I thought I was being clever. Today I know I was just greedy and foolish. You turned what I saw as money into something far greater: opportunity, dignity, and hope for thousands of people. I'm now working at a cooperative in rural Vermont, teaching logistics to other recovering alcoholics like me. It's simple but honest work, and for the first time in my life, I feel useful. Mattie is growing up beautiful and smart. Melissa is a wonderful mother, and we're slowly trying to rebuild our relationship with open communication and transparency. Thank you for giving me a second chance when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for showing me there's a better way to live. With admiration and respect, Brian. During her acceptance speech, Jennifer spoke about Mrs. Eleanor, the importance of family traditions, the strength of women, and how suffering can be turned into growth. 5 years ago, she told the audience of 1,000, I thought I had lost everything. My marriage, my trust in others, my faith in love. Today I know I lost nothing. I just let go of what was holding me back from finding my true purpose. The inheritance my grandmother left me wasn't money. It was a lesson on how to turn pain into strength, betrayal into opportunity, and loss into multiplication. Today, over 5,000 women work in our cooperative network. More than 3,000 young people have benefited from our scholarship fund. And it all started with a sealed letter and a key hidden in a Bible. Jennifer finished her speech by quoting Mrs. Eleanor's words, "True riches cannot be divided, only multiplied when shared with love." After the ceremony, she returned to Burlington and went straight to the house that had once been her grandmother's. She sat in the rocking chair and opened a photo album from the cooperative. 1,000 smiling faces of women who had found dignity through their work. Hundreds of young graduates supported by scholarships. Entire families lifted out of poverty by the opportunities created through the network. "Grandma," she said aloud, "I think I've lived up to your legacy." The wind rustled the curtains, and Jennifer was sure she heard Mrs. Eleanor's voice whisper, "I always knew you would, my dear. I always knew." That night, before bed, she wrote a letter to keep with the family recipes. "To the future generations of our family, if you're reading this, it's time for you to understand the true meaning of our legacy. It's not the recipes, not the money, not the businesses we built. It's the ability to turn love into opportunity for others, tradition into innovation, suffering into wisdom. Every generation faces its own challenges. Mine was learning that true wealth isn't divided, it's multiplied. Yours will be different, but the principle remains the same. Use what you've been given to create something greater, something that benefits not just our family, but the whole community. Always remember, we are not keepers of a treasure to be hidden. We are sowers of a legacy to be shared." With all my love and faith in the future, Jennifer Peterson, 2029. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story. Do you believe Jennifer made the right decisions? How would you have reacted in her place? Share your honest thoughts in the comments. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other moving stories. Your participation means so much to us.